All right. Welcome, everybody. Today, I have guest Mac Haddow on from the AKA. I wanted to go over with him the recent Senate Health Committee vote from June 14th and what that bill and supposed legislation is going to do, because I don't disagree with all the things it was going to do. We wanted to lower prescription drug costs, prevent baby formula shortages in the future. But the big thing I circled on my side was I wanted to give more regulatory powers to the FDA, in particular, oversight to the supplement industry. And that's what I have concerns about. I know a lot of people on my channel here take a lot of different kinds of supplements. Some people take Kratom. And I wanted to figure out how this could impact those kinds of things. So thank you for coming on the show this morning, Mac. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Everything's great. So, what did this legislation mean to you, and what do you think the consequences of this could be, like moving forward here?
Well, the American Kratom Association is dedicated to preserving the right of American consumers to have access to safe, unadulterated Kratom products without the interference of the government. Our problem with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has been that they, using the discretionary powers that are given to them under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, have decided to target kratom as a substance that they want to eliminate. Now, fortunately, the FDA does not have the authority on its own to schedule kratom under the Controlled Substances Act. That is a power that's held by the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the checks and powers along the way on that are that first, the Department of Health and Human Services has to solicit the opinions of the National Institutes on Drug Abuse about whether or not the substance which the FDA wants to schedule is in fact a substance that's dangerous and highly addictive, which is an essential criteria under the Controlled Substances Act. And then they have to evaluate on their own whether or not the FDA's recommendation is valid. Then, if they conclude that at HHS, and that authority is designated to the Assistant Secretary for Health, it is then transmitted to the Department of Justice, who delegates this authority to the Drug Enforcement Administration. And then the DEA has to make their own independent evaluation as to whether or not the substance recommended for scheduling meets the criteria. So you have that framework in place that is supposed to protect us. And typically what happens is the FDA makes a recommendation, NIDA rubber stamps it, HHS rubber stamps it, and it goes to the DEA and they rubber stamp it, because the premise is that the FDA is acting in the interest of the American public. We know from sad experience that the FDA has within their agency a number of people who have a bias, and a strong bias, against any botanical product. They don't like them. They don't want them because they're in their view, not in a position where the FDA can effectively regulate them. So they want to ban them. And they prefer to have everything run through the new drug application process. This is the very same battle that we're going through right now that we went through back in 1994 and for a decade leading up to 94, where the FDA was doing exactly what they're doing to kratom to all dietary supplements and vitamins. They demonized them. The FDA claimed that vitamins and dietary supplements were killing people, that because of that, then all of these products needed to be banned from the marketplace and forced into the sieve of the new drug application process. That's what the FDA is all about. Now, in 1994, the Congress reacted to that overreach of power that the FDA was attempting to grab, and they enacted unanimously the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. It's called the DSHEA Act. And it essentially said that the FDA's authority was limited in terms of regulating dietary supplements and vitamins. But for a provision that said that if a product was in commerce prior to 1994, which, by the way, Kratom was, and the standards for that are exactly illustrate what the problem is with the FDA. But if anything that was in commerce prior to 94 was in fact grandfathered in, but every new dietary ingredient had to go through an approval process where a company that wanted to introduce into the marketplace a dietary ingredient or supplement had to go to the FDA and give the information that's required under the DSHEA Act on its safety. And that's worked well. It's not a perfect bill. No one suggested it was. But instead of saying, let's fix the bill, the FDA has consistently said it needs to be repealed. And so if the FDA had its way, the DSHEA Act would be off the books, and you would have a $53 billion industry, which has enormous economic impacts on the American economy, and an industry that provides products that the consumers have accepted. More than 80% of Americans use dietary supplements and vitamins to maintain their health and well-being. The FDA would like to eliminate all of that, take away the choice and the freedom that consumers have to make these independent, informed choices about products that they want to use for these purposes. Kratom is squarely in the same target area that the FDA has today. We know that in 2016, the FDA went to the DEA and said, schedule this. Now, they used the emergency power section of the Controlled Substances Act in 2016, which allowed the FDA to streamline its application. They didn't have to prove everything. But what it said was, this is a dangerous substance which is killing people on our streets. By the way, this particular section of the Controlled Substances Act was designed to get street drugs off of the marketplace. So if you have a formulated product that was killing people and you had to document the safety aspect of that, you could then ban it. And then it went through a 2-year evaluation period. It was a temporary restriction. That's the restriction that the FDA used, even though they only had, by their own egregious methodology, could only identify 44 deaths that they at the time claimed were caused by kratom. Now, once the public scrutiny was applied to that, and once the outcry, both in Congress and among the public, was evident to the DEA took an unprecedented action. Never in 82 previous submissions for scheduling of substances under that section of the Controlled Substances Act had there been a rescission or withdrawal. The DEA did it. And they said to the FDA, prove your case. Don't give us this 3-factor analysis, which is what they were using. Give us the scientific evidence on the 8 factors that are required for scheduling of any substance under the Controlled Substances Act. So they challenged the FDA to do that. They told them that when they withdrew the application on October 13th of 2016, they said to the FDA, give us your 8-factor analysis by December 1st. We're going to open up a public comment period. We're going to get what people...
What are the 8 factors, by the way? Do you know them off the top of your head?
Well, they break down into 3 essential things. Is it highly addictive? So there's a couple factors associated with that where you have to prove the addiction levels. Does it pose a safety threat to the American people? Is it a precursor to another drug? In other words, does it induce people to then go to more dangerous substances? And then the one that's really misunderstood, does it have an approved medical use? So these 8 factors essentially lay out the scientific case that the FDA has to make. Now, you will hear the FDA say all of the time, and you'll hear it repeated over and over again by the Mayo Clinic, by the Cleveland Clinic, by people that should know better, that they say the reason you should schedule kratom is, and they list off the fact, they claim that it's highly addictive, that it's unsafe, and that it has no approved medical use. Well, the fact that a product does not have an approved medical use is not the criteria. That criteria says that if it is unsafe, if it is highly addictive, and then if it does not have a approved medical use. But they like to make that, well, that's one of the characteristics. So if it has no approved medical use, even if you don't get the other factors in play, then you can ban it. That's not true. And the FDA allows that disinformation to circulate in the marketplace.
They love that
every day. Of course they do, because they want to demonize kratom. So that's where we are today. The FDA does not play by the rules. And here's the unfortunate reality that we live in. There is no way that the U.S. Congress can pass a law that says this is what you should do on specific products that doesn't allow the FDA some discretion. Because obviously there's no way the Congress could evaluate every substance and say, okay, we agree or disagree. Now, the Congress does retain the authority to schedule substances. They can do that without the DEA. They could just by an act of Congress do that. They also have the authority to deschedule something. They could, by an act of Congress, take something off the scheduled list. By the way, they did that in the Farm Bill in 2017 when they descheduled marijuana that had a THC content of 0.3% or less in hemp. And they said that is descheduled and they're no longer a part of the Controlled Substances Act. Congress did that. Now, the reason they did it is because the FDA was demonizing marijuana and THC content in hemp, and the Congress wanted to step in and say, we're fixing this. The FDA is wrong on this issue. Now, here's what happened since then. Even though the Congress said it is legal to sell a hemp CBD product with THC content of 0.3% or less into the marketplace. And since then, the FDA has not allowed a single CBD product to be approved. And their claims are all over the map. They don't care what Congress says because they were given this authority of discretion, and it demonstrates without question that the FDA will prosecute its bias against herbal and botanical products because they don't like them. And CBD is the perfect example of it. You can go into every state in the United States and you can buy a CBD product today. Now, it won't be very well formulated or regulated because the FDA refuses to develop the standards that are done all over Europe in terms of what a safe daily dose is. And so the CBD marketplace is full of adulterated products where you get poorly formulated, badly formulated, deliberately adulterated to enhance their effects, or no CBD in them at all. They just call them CBD. But you can go in every state and buy those products. And in every transaction that takes place in the United States today to buy a CBD product, it is federally illegal. That's a fact. Now, how does the FDA get away with this? Because everybody knows that the best course of action for CBD would be to develop the standards for products coming onto the marketplace to make sure that they have adequate levels of CBD in them, that they're safe levels. They should also require that they not be adulterated with dangerous substances, which the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act provides for. This is what the FDA should be doing. They refuse to. And when they're called out on it, and most recently, when Commissioner Califf was questioned by Mark Pocan from Wisconsin in a House Appropriations Committee, Dr. Califf said, I can't believe that when I left the FDA back in the Obama days and then came back that not a single bit of progress has been made on CBD. What does that tell you?
They haven't approved anything new in regard to CBD since 2017.
The FDA has a bias against CBD. And what we're run by is an unelected bureaucrat that gets to dictate the policy about CBD in the United States. And you have a feckless bureaucracy at the FDA that refuses to root out that individual or group of individuals that have this bias and force them to account for federal law. Right. It is astounding. And you see that same group of people are the ones who are controlling the Kratom narrative as we go forward here. This is not only disappointing, it is outrageous. And now, because the Controlled Substances Act does not provide for the FDA to have the amount of authority that they want, they are actively trying to find alternative mechanisms and laws that they can use in order to restrict commerce with respect to botanicals, including kratom. So here's the perfect example. The FDA has the authority under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to issue import alerts on any dangerous substance that's coming into the United States. The import alert was designed for the FDA to have the ability to identify and then put an importer of a dangerous substance on the red alert list so that every time a product from that particular exporter comes into the United States, Customs and Border Patrol can say, okay, we're seizing it. They could do that. And they've done it for decades effectively.
I've heard they're trying to do this in 2024 to kratom. You know about that?
Well, of course, they did this in 2012. The FDA slapped the first import alert on kratom. Then they added the second one. The two import alerts are bizarrely shoehorned into this authority because this is what it says. The first one says that all kratom raw materials, all of it, it doesn't matter where it's coming from, that enters the United States is subject to the import alert because there has not been an approved new dietary ingredient notification to be sold as a dietary supplement. Now, that's a misstatement of the law. The law says under the DSHEA Act that a new dietary ingredient notification can be obtained from the FDA. The FDA is the sole arbiter of it. And so if they allow for an application to be processed and a marketer to go on the market as an NDIN, then a product can legitimately and legally be marketed. The FDA has received multiple NDINs and they've refused all of them. And they have said they will never approve an NDIN. Now, they're under pressure to do so now because of their intransigence on this issue. But they'll never approve a kratom NDIN because they consider it to be fundamentally unsafe. And that when it enters the marketplace, and here's the only advantage that an NDIN provides to a dietary supplement marketer, it allows you to use structure function claims. So if you want to sell Kratom as a dietary ingredient approved with a new dietary ingredient notification, and you get approval, you can say it makes you feel better. Structure function claims are general claims that you can make about what the product's effects will be. You can't make a therapeutic claim, and that's the second import alert. Second import alert says that all Kratom raw materials are per se illegal because the Kratom is being marketed in the United States as a therapeutic agent to deal with opioid crisis, pain relief, and a host of other maladies that people are facing. Now, neither one of those import alerts is grounded in the intent of the law. The law was only designed to target individual companies and in rare cases to allow for an entire product line to be banned. And it assumes that it is so toxic, so dangerous, that that's the basis upon which the FDA acts. We know that Kratom is safe in its pure, unadulterated form. If a Kratom manufacturer decides to use an unapproved structure function claim, the FDA has every right to put an import alert on that particular company. They can also restrict that company under other provisions of law, and they're fine. The same is true if a company makes an illegal therapeutic claim in order to enhance sales for their product. The American Kratom Association has filed more than 60 complaints with the FDA over the last 2 years about companies that are illegally marketing Kratom products, making therapeutic claims about benefits that can only be marketed if they go through the new drug application process. After 2 years, the FDA finally came out last week and issued warning letters against, I think, 3 or 4 of those companies. We have over 60 plus that have done it. The FDA is not serious about this. They are using import alerts as a tool, and inappropriately so, in order to restrict Kratom raw materials coming into the United States, because as a bulk raw material, Kratom is not unsafe. It's not being marketed for anything. It's only after a manufacturer then goes through the manufacturing process, produces a product, and then goes on the marketplace with it. We know that that's not what's happening with the vast majority of Kratom products. We know that they take the raw materials, they test them to make sure that they don't have salmonella and other contaminants in them. They test them to make sure that the finished products are pure, unadulterated Kratom with no synthetic enhancements, with no elevation of the natural alkaloids, and no addition of a dangerous substance. That's what the bulk of the manufacturers are doing in America, and the FDA plainly does not give a damn. They want to ban all Kratom products, so they claim today, and you heard this in a bizarrely weird explanation from Governor Parson in Missouri, where he tried to justify his veto on the Kratom Consumer Protection Act last week. He stood up, first he called it Kratom, which he obviously shows he doesn't know much about it. And his staff did very poor work here in preparing him. But then he said that the FDA says that Kratom is illegal and we don't want to get out of sync with the FDA. What is he talking about? I mean, not only is Kratom not illegal, it is legal in all but 6 states in the country, and Missouri one of them. And his veto only ensured one thing, and that is that Kratom that's sold in the state of Missouri will not be restricted in terms of the adulterants that are added to it that are dangerous for Missouri citizens. And it will also allow kids to have access to Kratom. And the only reason a kid's going to be interested in Kratom is if it's adulterated, because Kratom in its natural form does not provide the euphoric reinforcing high that cheap street drugs can provide that kid. And its bitter taste is sort of a natural version for a kid to want to use it. And the only reason a kid would use Kratom is for the purpose of it being because it's adulterated and gives them that high. This is the kind of dangerous disinformation that the FDA is circulating about Kratom, and that's what they're about to do or trying to do with expanded powers under what's called the FDA Safety and Landmark Advancement Act, which is wrapped into this very pretty bow that says, oh, we're just trying to protect the American public. We're not. What the FDA has encouraged with this law, which passed the Help Committee on a 13-9 partisan vote, says is that they are going to dramatically expand the powers of the FDA when it comes to their ability to interact and interdict any product that they don't like that is defined under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act as a dietary ingredient. It gives them the ability, without taking final action, to say to a Kratom manufacturer, you can no longer sell Kratom. They won't have, and final agency action is important because when the FDA evaluates something and says, here's our decision, then the party that's affected by that decision can take them to court. But this law, if it's passed, allows the FDA to make an interim decision and ban that company from the marketplace, and there is no recourse to the courts because the FDA will say, oh, it's still under evaluation. They've actually done this with a product called NAC. NAC's amino acid that has been used for 4 decades as a dietary supplement. And the FDA a year and a half ago decided, again, this small group of people that are at the FDA that are anti anything that isn't a new drug application, decided that they wanted to go after NAC products. NAC products that have been on the market for 4 decades, safely used and benefit people, and they went after them. And so, but they didn't take final agency action. They just said, we're putting out an advisory that we believe that these products are dangerous. And what happened was Amazon, seeing the FDA's advisory, pulled all NAC products off of the market in the Amazon platform. It was an unfair intrusion into the marketplace. It's one that the FDA should not have the authority to do. They did not take final agency action. The only recourse was to go through citizens petitions, which were finally answered a year and a half later, and only under pressure from Senator Mike Lee when he started going after the FDA about this. And finally, the FDA admitted, well, we really don't have any safety data that justifies our action. We were just concerned.
Right, because
they were concerned they destroyed a marketplace.
It was studied as a drug first. That was their explanation about NAC. Since before 1964, it was a drug first. So they said, oh, yes, this is our reason for putting out that advisory.
Right, and it's part of the what's called the drug exclusion rule that says that if a product is introduced for marketing as a drug, then it cannot be introduced as a dietary supplement. But that is an abuse of that particular law because the NAC products were not in that category. However far they wanted to stretch it, the FDA couldn't justify that because NAC products were never marketed as effectively as a drug.
So about this legislation here, or act, one they're trying to do, it would put the onus on all of these supplements possibly to have to prove their safety. Is that one of the things this act could do? Well,
that's what the DSHEA Act does now.
Right.
You have to prove it's safe, right? What this does, it allows the FDA without any process, without any requirement to submit. The manufacturer of a product does not have the ability to submit anything to exclude or avoid the action that would be taken by the FDA. This gives unprecedented power of the FDA to simply say, we require you to give your label to us. Once we receive the label, the label just says this is what the product is, right. Then the FDA can say, we don't like this label, and so you're not allowed to go to market. And then you're off. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it, not a single thing.
What could they say are reasons why they don't like the label? Like there's certain ingredients they could say, this is unsafe, so we don't like this label. Or God forbid they make a therapeutic claim on there. They wouldn't like that label either, right?
Well, yeah, I suspect that there is no one that has half a brain that would submit a label that included an illegal therapeutic claim. But all this would have to do is say, this product contains kratom. And, the alkaloids of kratom, metrogynine, 7-hydroxymetrogynine, and the FDA would say, we deem that to be unsafe. We don't have the evidence that's available to us. No submission for it. You don't get to say, well, here's our evidence. They can just say, we're not approving your label, therefore you're off the marketplace. And they then, the only challenge you would have is to say, you're wrong. And please listen to us. Please let us submit some information to show that you're wrong. Please let us talk to you. You can't take them to court because it's not final agency action. Because the FDA would defend themselves and saying, we're still considering this, just like they did with NAC. Right. And they just
Senator Murray's in charge of this, right?
Senator Murray is chairman of the Senate Health Committee, and she is a obvious proponent with Senator Durbin. This is Senator Durbin's bill. And he added the mandatory product listing provisions to the Food Safety and Landmark Advancements Act without a single hearing, not a word of testimony that's been provided, which is the way legislation should be formulated, because it would give us at the American Kratom Association the opportunity to testify. It would give the American people that are Kratom consumers the opportunity to weigh in the course of legislation as to whether it's a good thing. It would give the millions and millions of dietary supplement consumers the ability to come and talk. It would give scientists the opportunity to testify. None of that happened because Senator Durbin knew, and you just have to listen to him when he introduced the bill in late May, I think it was. He stood up and said that he wanted this legislation to go through because he was tired of the fact that the consumers of dietary supplements had berated him, had called him names, and made him feel bad. And that he was finally glad that his nemesis on this issue was gone, and that was Senator Orrin Hatch, who had left the Senate in 2019 and just passed away recently. But he knew, and he acknowledged in his floor speech, that when Senator Hatch was there was no chance for his legislation, because Senator Hatch would rally the dietary supplement community to force the FDA to recant, or the Congress not to pass this kind of legislation.
Who's our new Senator Hatch?
Well, that's the challenge. And I think we're seeing some great positive things emerge because of the FDA's overreach here. I think Senator Mike Lee from Utah is a potential strong advocate to replace Senator Hatch, as is Senator Romney. Utah is an important state in the dietary supplement industry because it is the ground zero of where dietary supplement products first were manufactured and the marketplace was accepting. And Senator Hatch became a great advocate of that, not only because of that interest in the state, but because of his personal commitment to dietary supplements. He was a Kratom consumer. He was a dietary supplement consumer.
Really?
And he was a believer in it. And so you see today there is a void that needs to be filled. And we're seeing some positive reactions, from positive in our sense, of senators and House members who are waking up to the fact that the FDA's overreaches need to be constrained. So, Congressman Mark Pocan from Wisconsin is the most magnificent champion for Kratom, because of a personal experience with someone close to him who uses Kratom, believes in it, and he's seen the benefits of it. And he's standing up and fighting for us every day. He is to be applauded, championed. He's great. And we need more of those people to understand about Kratom. But what Senator Durbin was complaining about was, well, the influencer in the debate about FDA's powers was Senator Orrin Hatch, and no one's there now, so he's going to fill the void, and he's going to try to take this legislation that he's tried for over a decade to get into some legislation, and has failed until now. Senator Murray, chairman of the Help Committee, has agreed to allow this to happen, and she inserted that she wouldn't allow any amendments that would have modified this legislation to make it more reasonable, which would have given the consumers more power to actually influence the decision, and allowed for the courts to evaluate whether there was an overreach, and not let the FDA hide behind this, it's undergoing regulatory review. So it's not a final agency action. The products aren't on the market because we don't allow for their labeling to be consistent with what we at the FDA believe to be appropriate. And by the way, anyone who thinks that the FDA is right on all issues is up in the night. The FDA has been wrong on numerous issues. They're wrong on CBD. And the American consuming public has said it forcefully. You are wrong, and they don't care. And that's our problem here. I think that if this legislation passes in its current form, it grants to the FDA enormous powers that will result in a backlash that will come back to bite them, because it isn't just Kratom. It is an enormous number of products that are on the marketplace that the FDA will act to withdraw from the marketplace using these broad new powers under the mandatory product listing that will create havoc in the dietary supplement marketplace. And that's tragic when you think of the benefits that come from people consuming dietary supplements to maintain their health and well-being. The perfect example is what we've observed with good scientific evidence from the COVID pandemic. People were using dietary supplements to boost their immune systems and protect them against these, obviously the impacts and effects of COVID. That's something we should applaud, support, and encourage. And under this legislation, that's all gone, because the American public will be stripped of their ability to consume safe products that are adequately and appropriately formulated and manufactured, because the FDA doesn't like them. And they'll start.
I don't like the fact that they're able to add so many things onto these acts, right? So this one act in particular is supposed to do many different things. To me, there should really only be more of a centered focus on what each act is about, but instead they're trying to do so many different things with each act that it becomes more difficult to kind of pinpoint things you don't like or they don't like to pass, and they can do something about it. But the way it is now, when they do those add-ons, it becomes much more difficult.
Well, and here you have a very unique situation. You have a member of the Senate leadership, Senator Durbin, who is using his powers as a member of the leadership to add on legislation that has had not a single hearing and no testimony onto a must-pass piece of legislation. He knows it's going to pass because this funds a significant portion of the FDA's budget through user fees. So that's why we're in this battle. That's what we're fighting for. And he deliberately did it because he knows one thing: it would never pass the Congress in its current form by using this process that we're currently going through. He did this deliberately, and he's abusing his power as the majority leader in the United States. I'm sorry, as the deputy majority leader in the United States Senate. This is an abuse of his power. It is an abuse of the system. This bill would not pass if it went through regular order, which means hearings, testimony, going to the floor on its own. They stuck it onto a piece of legislation that is going to pass the United States Senate. And we hope in the House side that the cooler heads prevail and they say, no, we're not going to tolerate this. We want to strip out this or modify them significantly so that we don't have this problem that we're dealing with right now.
Where does this go next? Does it go to the House to be voted on there next and then to the Senate?
Well, no, it's right now. It is passed out of the committee, and it will then go to the Senate floor for a vote. There will be some debate on the Senate floor, but because the Democrats have the majority and Senator Durbin has gotten the cooperation of both Senator Murray and Majority Leader Schumer, this bill will pass the United States Senate, I suspect, without an amendment. Now, we could get lucky, and the influence of the hundreds of thousands of emails and calls have been made opposing this legislation to the United States Senate, we might get some modification that would be beneficial to us. But then the bill would go to the House because the House has already passed the Food Safety and Landmark Advancements Act out of the House. It'll go back to the House for review because there are obviously changes and additions in the Senate language. And it will be up to Chairman Pallone on the Energy and Commerce Committee to make a decision about how he will evaluate that in a hearing, and then whether or not he accepts it or the committee accepts it. And then we go to the House floor. Then they'll have a conference committee between the House and the Senate because there obviously will be differences in the bills. Now, conference committees are supposed to be public meetings where appointed members of the Senate and appointed members of the Congress, the House of Representatives, sit down and they actually debate what the changes need to be, and they come up with a consensus bill. Now, in reality, over time, that's become too cumbersome to get all these members together, so the staff does this. This is a paper conference, and I suspect that's what we're going to have here, because the staff will make this decision about what comes in or what comes out. Now, that doesn't mean that the staff's not influenced by their member, and obviously, Chairman Pallone on the House side we hope, will be the one to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to allow this broad expansion of FDA authority to go through on my watch without at least evaluating it as to what its potential impacts are through a hearing and testimony. Now that of course will be fought by Senator Durbin on the Senate side, where he just wants to give carte blanche authority to the FDA to do whatever they damn well please about dietary supplements and botanical supplements, and that's the challenge that we're going to face here.
So to even get to the Senate Health Committee vote, it had to pass something in the House previously, correct? Because I'd always thought the order of operations was the House, then to the Senate, then signed into law or whatever it needs to be. So
that's true for appropriations bill. All budget bills have to originate in the House. The other legislation that is just authorizing legislation can originate in either chamber, and then it goes back and forth until they finally get.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's only budget bills that have to originate by the Constitution in the House of Representatives.
Very interesting. So to all the people that want to make their voice heard about this, senators and Congress people, they the people to reach out to now to try to talk to them, send emails about what supplements and Kratom have done for their lives?
This is an enormous lift, and you can go to the American Kratom Association website and you can see the advocacy section, because it will give you a pathway to send your message to the United States Senate and to the targeted members in the U.S. House of Representatives. We need to rise up, have our voices heard. We need to tell the Congress that the FDA is wrong on these issues and should not be given these broad powers, because they cannot be trusted with them. And they can't be, because they're driven by these zealots who are anti-dietary supplement, anti-botanical products, and they're anti-kratom. We can't allow this to go through and trust the FDA to do the right thing. If they pass this bill, I'm sure the FDA would, kind of go along for a couple months or a year, and then they would start, because this is the way they operate. They would hide in the weeds, and then they'll lash out. And as soon as those labels are collected, and they see that here's a kratom manufacturer that says, oh, it has 7-hydroxymetrogenine. Oh, that's a dangerous substance. So we can't let that product go on the market. Even though 7-hydroxymetrogenine is present in the natural product at levels that are insignificant to have any impact on the health, they select out 7-hydroxymetrogenine and say, oh, let's look at 7-OH. 7-OH can be very dangerous. It's more powerful than morphine. In the same concentrated levels, that's true, but that's not what nature did. Nature got it right. They produced 7-OH in the plant, and it's as a metabolite in the drying process at a level that is insignificant to any health impact, but that's not what the FDA will highlight. They'll just say, oh, 7-hydroxymetrogenine. Dr. Chris McCurdy says this exactly right. He said, when you look at a botanical product that has multiple alkaloids, you have to look at it as an orchestra. You don't pick out a single instrument. When you look at the sound that you're hearing, and which is what the FDA will do with 7-OH, you listen to the whole thing, and is it pleasing? And in this case, is it safe for us if you look at the symphony of alkaloids and their effects in the kratom plant? That's where we are. And the FDA hates it. They want to ban it, and we've seen that. And they're defenseless when it comes to their saying, oh, well, we'll be fair on kratom. When have they been fair on kratom? They've been proven to be unfair at every stop. They had 2 applications that were horsed up, mischaracterized, based on poor science, on false information that was submitted to the DEA. They got caught twice, and it was rejected. They sent the same dossier of inaccurate information, incomplete information, false information to the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence at the World Health Organization, and they got slam dunked by a unanimous vote on it being scheduled, and on 7-hydroxy, an 11-1 vote. And so the FDA's failed at every turn to convince anyone. The Assistant Secretary for Health, Dr. Giroir, called them out. He called Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who was then the FDA commissioner, and told him, if you believe this, if you really think kratom is dangerous, prove it. And the FDA couldn't, because it's not. And they want their name, the FDA. We're the all-knowing power to go through, and they want to use a section of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act with enhanced powers under this Food Safety and Landmark Advancements, which incorporates the mandatory product listing, and they want to expand that power and say, oh, trust us. No, we're not going to trust them, because they have proven themselves consistently to be untrustworthy. And we have to stand up and fight for our rights as consumers to have access to these products.
And I guess you'd also recommend people donating to the AKA, any other places to perhaps donate to help fight this as well?
Well, we are with a consortium of groups that are fighting this legislation. The AK is proud to join groups like the American, I'm going to get them all wrong. We got APA and with NPA, with a number of the citizens' health groups that advocate for safely formulated dietary supplements to be available, and herbal products to be available to the public without undue FDA interference. We're all for banning products that are improperly marketed and improperly formulated so that they're unsafe. But we don't want the FDA to be the arbiter of a product that they just don't like. And that's where we are with dietary supplements and kratom today with the FDA.
Now, I do know this. I do want your opinion on this too before I let you go. There are a lot of people who are on the FDA's side, and I see them on places like Reddit, people that maybe work for the FDA, and people that are on the Sam Harris subreddit. They are all for Big Pharma, and they're all for the FDA. And they'll say things like, how about that salmonella that was in this one batch? Or how about the dose determines the poison for all of those big bad prescription drugs, right? So they got a lot of people on their side. What do you think would be good talking points to them? Because sometimes their opinions do matter when they're voting in people, right? They're voting in their Congress people, they're voting in the senators. So their thoughts on the stuff matters. What's a good talking point to those kinds of people that don't really want to see like the good side of supplements, the good side of Kratom? They only want to see the FDA's version.
Well, the truth is that the old adage, follow the money. I think when you look at what the big pharma's motivations are, and by the way, I'm a fan of pharma. I think all of us should be a fan of big pharma developing breakthrough innovative therapies that extend lives, that improve the quality of life,
Right.
and that save lives. There should be an equal respect for botanical products and herbal products that are not in the traditional chemically formulated realm of molecules, big or small, that are the focus of the FDA. The FDA will do very well, thank you, without having to ban dietary supplements, herbal products, and botanical products from the marketplace. And here's the most important thing. The FDA should not be the final arbiter. There ought to be a checks and balances that's instilled into this system, and the mandatory product labeling strips that out. And that checks and balances includes the ability of other agencies in the federal government to make evaluations about the addiction liability of substances. NIDA does not agree with the FDA at all on Kratom with respect to the claims made by the FDA that the Kratom is highly addictive. It is not. The FDA doesn't agree with the safety analysis provided by the FDA where they claim that people are dying from pure unadulterated Kratom. That's not true, and the NIDA knows it. And the U.S. Congress, look at the report language that was just passed by the U.S. Congress in the House for the FY23 budget, the fourth year in a row where they have specifically stated that Kratom should continue to be accessible. It should not be scheduled, and it should be tested and researched further. They're all for this. The FDA is the outlier here. And look at what Secretary Becerra said in response to a letter that was sent from Congressman Pocan and Senator Lee, asking why the FDA was not restrained in their application to the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence on Kratom. Why didn't they follow the science? And the response back from Secretary Becerra was, and this was in March of this year, that they now recognize there are significant knowledge gaps about Kratom, and they will stand down from any efforts to ban Kratom. Now, how do you tell the governor of Missouri that that's the position when the FDA is flooding the pipeline with the same disinformation? You can't tell me that the governor of Missouri didn't veto the Kratom Consumer Protection Act without consulting the FDA. He said he did. And so that being the case, why does the FDA continue to do this? And yet Secretary Becerra, their boss, said we're not doing it. And they also recognized that there are people that are benefiting from the use of Kratom. And he recognized that the safety data that had been relied upon by the FDA and had been espoused by them was incomplete and inaccurate because it's adulterated products. And that they have, and here's the unspoken part of it, the FDA today has the authority under the law to take every adulterated Kratom product off of the marketplace if they chose to do so that's truly unsafe. But what the FDA doesn't want to do that. They want all Kratom off the marketplace. So their target, they expose consumers to risk because of their lack of action against adulterated Kratom products today. We're trying to get them to do it. We advocate for it to protect consumers, but the FDA is refusing up to now.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here, Mac. Did you have any other closing thoughts or any other action items for the people out there watching that are a little concerned?
Well, other than to say thank you to the Kratom community that consistently stands up and speaks for the right of consumers to have access to safe products to make informed decisions about maintaining their own health and well-being. Thank you to the courageous people that are willing to fight back against the FDA, both with their financial support and with their voices, who say you're wrong. I have been in hearings across America where thousands and thousands of people have stood up and testified that Kratom has saved their lives, has improved the quality of their life. And those people need to be heard. And the FDA's deliberate acts in order to try to restrain our freedoms needs to be stopped. And we need the U.S. Congress to do that. We need the state legislatures to do that. And to accomplish that, we need the continued support of the Kratom community. And so we're most grateful for them, for those advocates that work tirelessly in the trenches, that are that are watching to see what's happening, making sure that we're alerted at the American Kratom Association to local efforts to try to ban kratom, to empower us to go out and find the scientists, to amplify the science, to do research that proves the FDA is wrong. We're grateful to all those people, and we appreciate your allowing me to come on today and to promote this message, because it's critically important for our freedom as we go forward.
Well, it's my pleasure having you on, and I'm always happy to help, especially in this fight, because like you said, it does help a lot of people, not just kratom, it's supplements in general that really improve the quality of life of millions of people in this country. And so it would be a damn shame if anything were to ever happen to that kind of thing. So thank you again for coming on to the show today, Mac. I appreciate it.
Glad to. Thank you for having me on.